Quophie Anochie to the GMF here in Britain. I don't think we've got anybody from Ireland, but welcome, sir. It's good to see you. I'm very confused today because I've never been asked in all my life what my charge is for the sermon, but it says the charge, so I'll tell you my charge afterwards. And the other thing is, as some of the people here know, our grandchild who was born a year ago is called Quophie, but I've never seen it spelled this way. I think this is of your own making, is that true? Yeah, I know. I think on your birth certificate it says K-O-F-I. So my brother, I'm really wanting to speak to you, but if I speak to you, I won't look at them. So this is for you, as for all of us. So I'll keep looking occasionally, but these words are for you, as for all of us. And as we heard the first reading, we heard the question of God to Isaiah, and we heard Isaiah's response. And so today we come to celebrate that Quophie has been sent by the Lord. I want to invite you, Quophie, to just hold on to three, because I can only think in three things in the middle of a Sunday afternoon when I've only got 40 minutes to preach before 4 o'clock. So, three things. That you've been sent by the Lord to be living in the presence of God. Living in the presence of God. A Ghanaian child living in Accra was told by his parents that they were moving to Takoradi. So the night before the move, the little girl was kneeling by her bed to say her prayers. And she said, "Papa God, this will be the last time I speak to you, because my parents are taking me to Takoradi tomorrow." And as strange as that story might sound, it's how many of us feel. We often feel that God is in one place, but we actually forget that God is everywhere. That God fills all things. And here is this beautiful picture from Isaiah chapter 6 of the God, the vision of Isaiah, of the God who fills the heavens, the God who fills all creation. Words that the writer of Isaiah is trying to share, to talk about the wonder, the splendor, the magnificence of God. There is no place that God does not exist. So Quophie, the same God you served in Ghana, is the same God you come to serve among us here. And God in Jesus Christ calls all of us here to live our life in the presence of God. So when Moses spent 40 days on the Mount of the Lord receiving the 10 Commandments, the Bible says this, that when he appeared, Moses did not know that his skin of his face shone because he had been talking with God. And Quophie, if there's one thing we want you to do, we want you to spend time in the presence of God. We want you to spend time talking with God. We want you to spend time in the presence of the Lord, in the holiness of the Lord, so that you can then come among us. You can go across the connection, teaching and sharing how we can live our life more fully in the presence of the Lord. So that vision of Paul can come true for us here today. In 2 Corinthians 3, Paul says, "And all of us, with unveiled faces, seeing the glory of the Lord, as though reflected in a mirror, are being transformed, are being changed into the same likeness of God, from one degree of glory to another. So welcome. You've been sent by the Lord, and you've been sent by the Lord to be living in the presence of God. But you've also been sent by the Lord among us to be listening to the voice of God. Hasn't it been a wonderful week in the life of British politics? It is really riveting. Which member of the cabinet is going to resign today? I don't know. Our gospel reading this morning in church, if you went to a morning service, was a gift. Where Jesus says, how can you think to build a tower if you don't know you've got enough money to finish it? How can you go to an army if you don't know you've got the soldiers to win? How can you start Brexit or no Brexit or whatever if you don't know you've got the resources for it to happen? And so people have been listening. But you know, sometimes we can be so busy with our own things that we don't listen. And so often at home I'm busy doing something and Myrtle will be chatting away to me and she'll say, "You're not listening to me, are you?" I'm sorry, did you say something? Wow. Because we can become so absorbed in what we're doing, we're not listening to anyone else. And our two readings today show us that Isaiah and Peter are listening to God. But they're not listening just to the word. Firstly, Isaiah is listening with his whole body, with all his senses. Because as the angel comes and touches his lips, he knows that he is forgiven. So it was the action. He listened to the whole action. And then, of course, he listened to the question of God, whom shall I send? Who will go for us? And Peter, likewise, in the second reading we heard today, Jesus doesn't actually say to Peter, you are forgiven. But by his actions, saying to Peter, come and have breakfast, taking Peter aside, asking Peter 3 times, Peter knew. He was listening, not to the voice, but to the actions of Jesus. And then he was able to respond, do you love me? Quophie, you have heard the voice of God speaking to you in Ghana. Sometimes the voice of God comes through the presiding bishop or through a chair of district. But they receive the voice of God through their own living in the presence of God. And we want you, as you live in the presence of God, to listen to the voice of God, that you can spend time in worship and study and prayer, and as you listen to God's voice, you will interpret God's voice for us here in these islands. That we may be given the courage like you, Quophie, that when we hear the voice of God, whom shall I send? Who will go for us? Like you, we may say, here am I, send me. As we celebrate here today with the GMF, I don't know whether there's anybody here from the ZMF, from the Zimbabwe Methodist Fellowship. But what a week for our Zimbabwean sisters and brothers. Not a week of rejoicing, but as Robert Mugabe has died, it reminds us, whether we're African, European, Asian, American, it doesn't matter, it reminds us that there are different styles of leadership. There's a style of leadership called Donald Trump. There's a style of leadership called Boris Johnson. Quophie, there are so many different styles of leadership. Your name reminds me of another Quophie, Anna, a statesperson. And as we want you to live in the presence of God, as we want you to listen to the voice of God, so we want you to be leading with the love of God. In the Bible, there are many different pictures of leadership. But one of the pictures that is there so often in the Old and the New Testament is the picture of the leader as a shepherd. And here in the second reading, Jesus is inviting Peter to be the shepherd of the early church, to tend them, to feed them, to care for the lambs and the sheep, the young and the old. And you, my brother, have been sent here by the presiding bishop and the executive to be chaplain to the Methodist Church Fellowship, Ghana, or the Ghanaian Methodist Fellowship. And we want you to be a shepherd among us, but a shepherd who leads in love. Like a shepherd, to look after the lambs and the sheep that are here. Anybody here today from Milton Keynes? Anybody from Nottingham? Anybody from Leeds? From Scotland? From Ghana? But in a sense, Quophie, these are already your sheep as our shepherd. But remember the parable of Jesus, the shepherd is also to go out and find the lost sheep. On Friday, Myrtle and I were in Morrison's in Enfield. We just popped to get something, and we don't live in posh Enfield, we only live in Tottenham, but we went to the rich place of Enfield. And we were in Morrison's, and there was these two Ghanaian women. I knew they were Ghanaian, the way they were talking. And they both worked in Morrison's. And eventually, she decided she'd serve us, and we were just chatting and chatting. And I go, it's Myrtle got out one of her many Ghanaian purses that you keep buying out. And so they said, oh, that's my country. We said, yeah, we know. So we just greeted her. They'd say, and she said, oh, Boko! And then, so I said, we're both a Sopho, and so her face just lit up, and of course, and then when she found we were Methodist, she said, oh yes, Methodist, yeah, Methodists are very strong. Maybe I ought to go back to Methodism. So I'm going to give you a little address, because what my brother Emmanuel here, followed by Reverend William, they went out and brought in the lost sheep. Some of them are in Pentecostal churches, and we love them for it, but many of them want to come home. But the third thing I just want to say to you, Quophie, and you and I have talked already about this, is as the Ghanaian Fellowship expands, as it continues to grow as we hope it will, we want you out in the connection. Which is why I am glad that the Methodist Church has not put you in London. Because London, you know, we're lovely people in London, aren't we? But we want to keep everything to ourselves. But his superintendent Rachel and the staff there, they're in a foreign land in Hertfordshire. Which allows him to get across the Little Keys, up to Nottingham, to Leeds, to Glasgow, to start a group in Manchester, in Birmingham, etc., etc. Which is why I'm so grateful to the brothers and sisters behind me. Ghanaian Heritage Methodist ministers in the British Church, who've kept this fellowship going this year, and I pray will work hand in hand with Quophie as he is the general shepherd over the rest of us as lowly sheep. But Quophie, all of this has to be done in love. Your response to the questions were that you would work among us and you would show us the love of Christ. And Jesus says, Quophie, Quophie, do you love me? Do you love me more than all these? And you have said, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And what about us? Jesus asked you and I that question. Do you love Jesus? Are you willing to go out for Jesus? And if your answer is the same as Quophie's today, you know I love you. God says, whom shall I send? Who will go for me? Here am I. Send me. In Jesus' name. Amen.